join us today. So Chris is going to give us an update about MDN, about the project, which I think it's really interesting. I'm personally I think the first time I hear about this project, I'm really excited to learn more about this. So I can't wait to learn more about this project further from Chris Mill himself. So Chris, the Zoom room is yours.
Okay, so let me see. Am I able to share my screen? Let's just see if this works. I always have a bad time trying to share my screen with
yeah, we can see it.
Zoom, so you can see the presentation. Let's see if it still works when I press the present button. Okay, can we still see that?
Yes.
Cool. Now I wonder if it'll still work when I try to change slides. These are all of the obstacles I find in my way when trying to do complicated things like slideshows in Zoom. So welcome to my presentation. I'm going to be talking today about MDN Yari, the new platform, but mainly in the context of really why it's such an interesting thing in terms of community involvement. That's kind of the main focus of this talk. So there's a bunch of stuff I won't talk about here. So did it change? Can you see the next slide? Yes, it's working. Marvelous. So yeah, I'm Chris. I am the content lead on MDN, and I do all sorts of things for the site, manage our team of contractors, write code and demos and documentation. I'm kind of a de facto community manager now. That's another thing I seem to have found myself doing, which is really good fun. I also do all of our dev outreach. I've been writing all of our blog posts and helping to do a whole load of outreach on the new platform on places like Twitter and Hacker News and other places where people have been giving us good feedback and not so good feedback. And I also like to think that I'm just general MDN dog's body. I do far too many things for this site, which is great. You know, it's a great passion of mine. So as you probably all heard, we did a fun thing this week. One of my favorite blog comments that we've had so far is basically somebody who managed to figure out exactly which anime we ripped this figure off from. And I didn't actually respond to them because I thought if I start responding admitting that we ripped it off from somewhere, it would probably be bad. So, which is, you know, I wouldn't say rip off. I would say it's more of a tribute. That's the way I like to look at it, but it's good anyway. It's so Yari is like a legendary kind of Japanese spear that was used to kill a demon bear, and Kuma is a bear. So you can see how this is all working. It sort of works. But yeah, we launched it on Monday at about 8 p.m. my time. I'm based in the UK, so it was quite a long day, but it seems to have gone fairly well. Not too much in terms of bad things coming back, and just lots of good things so far. So the basic gist in terms of the platform change is that we used to be an old archaic wiki system, and that's no longer the case. We're now a Jamstack architecture site, pulling the content from a GitHub repo. And there's a whole bunch of advantages, you know, in terms of the easiness of maintaining the actual platform and easiness of contributing to the platform. That's really, really easy. I mean, but, you know, my just maintaining the thing internally, massively increased performance. You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's such a good thing to move to this new, simpler architecture. But I personally feel that the main advantage is the increased possibility of community contributions. You know, because using GitHub pull requests for all of the content and platform contributions means we can actually have conversations with our community now, which sounds totally weird, but for years and years, the only way that you could contribute to MDM was to edit the wiki, and as soon as you press the save button, your content was published live immediately. That sounds good, but there's a bunch of bad things about that. You know, it's really, really difficult to give people credit for the work that they've done. You know, there's just a big list of names on each page, and it's very hard to really pinpoint who's got credit for what. It's difficult to kind of share tasks. It's like we had to have like a separate repo full of GitHub issues anyway to kind of say this is all the stuff we'd like you to do to the wiki, but now we can just do it all directly on the GitHub repo anyway, which just makes the whole kind of finding tasks and doling out of tasks a lot easier. One thing that I did hear a lot, and I still am hearing a bit, is people are kind of concerned that Git is seen as a high barrier to entry because it's quite a fiddly, annoying, hard tool to use. I agree with that, but at the same time, we haven't seen too much in terms of drop off in terms of people doing little drive-by edits, little tiny typo fixes and stuff like that. We still get quite a lot of that. I mean, the GitHub UI has an edit button on every page where you can just basically edit the simple content as it stands, and then it deals with generating a pull request for you if you use the GitHub UI. So anybody that isn't comfortable with using the local Git CLI and everything can just do that. So that seems to work pretty well. Quite pleased with that. Yeah, and we can actually review changes. This is great. Previously, they just happened, as I say, they went live. We also got tons of spam in the old system because we got lots and lots of people posting all manner of interesting things. The number of real estate agencies running their business off MDN. There's been a few of those in the years gone by, all sorts of strange things. But, we now have the ability to review and talk to people. The previous the previous way that we discussed things of our community was terrible, because if you made a change on the old wiki system and it was good, it was successful, you heard nothing. Whereas if it was a bad change, you'd get someone reverting your revision, and that was it. That was the only communication we had, which was a terrible way to do things, but it's much better now. And one big concern with moving to GitHub is loads of people were saying, well, what's going to happen? You're just going to get absolutely buried under millions of pull requests. So I recruited a team of reviewers, and we have used a code owners based system to dole out reviews. So there's a nice new feature on GitHub called GitHub Teams, which is hugely useful because you can basically just put together a team, which is a bunch of different people, and you can use your code owners file to apply a team to be the reviewers of a particular directory tree inside your repo, and then any pull requests that happen against files in that directory tree will be sent to that particular team of people to review automatically. So it's really quite nice. It's got a few rough edges around it, but it's working pretty well so far. And you can either set the distribution of pull requests to be done on a round robin basis or a load balancing basis. So you can either just sort of say, okay, we've got 3 reviewers, we're going to give pull requests 1 for etc. to the first person, and the next one's to the second person, the next person's one's to the third person. Or the load balancing system is instead you basically sort of say, okay, if the first person gets a pull request and reviews it really quickly because it was a really small pull request, they'll then get another one more quickly. Whereas say the third person, if they end up getting a massive pull request to review, which takes them a bit longer, they won't get another one until they've completed that pull request. So we're currently trying that one. Of course, I suppose the downside is that it might encourage someone to just be lazy and sit on a pull request for ages because they don't want to be sent another one. But our community is pretty passionate, so I trust them to not do things like that. So we're seeing how that goes. In terms of getting an idea of what the community can do to help us, again, like we have a whole bunch of places to go. I've with the help of Constantina and also Emma, who's unfortunately no longer with us, they helped me to create a much better contribute page. Previously, our contribute page was kind of just, you can do all of these 17,000 different things to help us, just literally we will throw the kitchen sink at you. And of course, that's terrible because that scares away community members. They just go, I don't know what to do here, choice paralysis, I'm leaving. So instead, we've now got this clean, simple page just with, the 3 top things that we'd like help with and how to go about those. And we also have a whole bunch, that page points you to the Sprint repo, which is the 3rd link down. And then that's where people submit their content bugs. Someone can submit an issue to say, I found a typo, can you please fix it, or whatever, and then people can go there and help us fix all of those issues. Although soon I am moving that to all of the machinery that controls that to just the content repo instead, which is the second one. That's where the MDN content actually lives. And I kind of had this half-baked idea that I wanted to keep the sprint repo where all of the actual bugs and pull requests are reported separate from that because of noise. But as it turns out, everyone is just submitting their issues to the content repo now because that's where the content is, and there's no way I can stop it. So I'm just going with the flow. I'm going to move all the machinery there. So we also have a separate repo called Yari, which is where the actual rendering machinery is. So we have the content in one repo and all of the machinery that renders that content and produces the MDN site in another repo. So that's the fourth one in that list there. And actually, I was talking earlier about it being much easier for contribution on the content, but it's much easier to contribute now on the platform side of things as well. So a nice little success story that we had earlier on this week is we used to have a system on the old MDM platform where you could add various URL parameters to the end of your URLs to get information about the page that you were on. So, for example, you could put $children on the end of the URL on MDN, and it would give you a JSON list with information about all of the different child pages below that page. Or you had a raw parameter and it would just spit out the raw HTML content, or a JSON parameter which would just spit out just JSON related to the specific page rather than it and all of its children. So those have gone away in the new system, and we didn't realize quite how much people were using those because we've never talked really to anybody outside the team who's used those. But all of a sudden 2 or 3 different groups popped up and said, hey, we have a WebStorm plugin which uses that thing to provide MDN content right in our IDE, and you've broken it, you evil people. And we were like, yeah, that's terrible. We should provide another way of getting that information as soon as possible. But then today, one of those community members has just submitted a pull request that's just done it for us in a few hours. And it's like, that's amazing. So, power to the community. It's really, really nice to see that kind of thing happening on the platform as well as the content. So another thing I wanted to mention going forward in terms of new possibilities that weren't even possible before in Kuma, one thing that was a total pain in the previous system was the fact that, in Kuma, all of the content was in a MySQL database, so it wasn't easy to get to. There was like a really kind of ramshackle put API that we had that we didn't really allow anybody to have access to because it was just too dangerous to allow people to have access to. You could have just had people, if you'd had that open, you could have had people just destroying every page on the site or replacing it with all kinds of things. So, but now it's all a flat file-based system. Somebody can just take a local clone of the repo and just attach any machinery they want to it to fix up errors to do mass edits to fix widespread errors, and then just send that to us as a pull request. So we've had loads of people experimenting already with, just automated mass edits to remove all of the duplicate words on the site or to remove all of the broken URLs. And we've had loads of that kind of contribution already, which has really helped to clean the site up. So that's been really, really encouraging. Like having it all available in a GitHub repo means that, if you can literally edit that content in any way that your tool chain allows you to, or in any way you want to. You can write a simple little Python script to just crawl through all those pages if you want to and just fix it in any way you like. So that's really, really encouraging. One thing that I did want to mention before the end of the talk is that localization is a bit of a hot topic right now of MDN. We had a huge, great long talk about what we were going to do with localization, because the problem was that our localization used to be completely Wild West. It was just every one of 35 different locales was open for people to submit translations, and then we displayed them just next to the ENUS version. But as I say, it was just too Wild West. There was nobody maintaining any of this stuff. You quite often had localization teams that just started and then sort of just gave up because it was such a lot of work after a little while, and then the content just sat there and stagnated and went out of date, which meant that it was kind of pointless, really. It was just a really difficult situation because we didn't have the resources to provide maintenance of that stuff. we didn't really have enough in the way of community people that could provide effective maintenance of that stuff. So rather than just have tons and tons of outdated locales stagnating on MDN, we came up with a two-part plan. So the first phase is that the new platform has all of the different all of the different translations published on it, just like it did before, but they're all frozen. So nobody can make edits to them right now, partially to just avoid them getting into even more of a mess, and partially just to keep down the number of pull requests that we're getting right now, because it's currently very high. But what we're working to do is to unfreeze certain locales in early 2021, and we're just going to unfreeze locales that have a dedicated community to maintain them. So the first three that we're going to start with are simplified Chinese, Japanese, and French, because all of those have got very, very active localization teams. So we're going to start putting together a process for the localization teams to communicate with us and keep their particular locales up to date, as people send in pull requests, and also as the English versions get changed, because obviously you want ideally to retain as much parity as possible between the locale and the English version. We're also then, as phase 2, going to implement some kind of automated translation system where we can kind of go, okay, if you have a dedicated locale team to keep that locale up to date, then great. But if not, and for the stuff that you don't have time to translate, we're just going to provide an automated translation, so that at least there's something rather than nothing, and it can remain up to date. So that's a sort of a tricky situation that we're currently in the very early stages of figuring out. What I am quite pleased about is we've actually had a lot less complaint from the different non-English speaking MDN communities than I expected us to have, because this is quite a big change that's quite hard to get used to. But a lot of people really seem to understand where we're coming from in terms of this, because we released several blog posts to communicate this really ahead of time and talk to a lot of our key community members to get their input on it. So that was handled fairly well, I feel. And as I say, I'm currently working with the Japanese, Chinese, and French communities to put together effective localization teams to handle those locales as we move forward into the next phase. So I just thought I'd mention that bit. So I believe that is it. So yeah, thanks for listening, and feel free to grab my email address and drop me a line if you'd like to give me any feedback, or in fact, we might have time for questions now.
Yes, we do have time for questions. So anybody have a question for Chris?
I got a question for you, Chris.
Okay.
It's not really about anything specific to the updates that you were talking about. It's more a general question on how things have been going with MDN since the major changes that happened earlier this year. I know that there were some significant changes to MDN that got some public attention, and obviously developers were having some issues with the state of MDN and what we were going to do with it, and like how it was going to turn out after that. There was a kind of a big state of limbo. So it seems like you came in and helped start picking up the pieces and organizing things. And I just kind of, I guess, understand how that went, because I know that we went from a good place to a bad place, and now we're back on track to going to a good place again.
Yeah, it was quite testing, shall I say. That's a very diplomatic word for it, isn't it? But yeah, it was tricky. I mean, the writers team went from me and then 4 full-time writers underneath me and my team, and then several contractors, to just me. And it was difficult, to say the least. But I went forward and put together a kind of like a minimum viability plan, just to kind of say, this is what we think we need at the very least. So we hired some contractors purely just to keep the continuous web platform documentation updated in the way that we did, because that's really most of the value of MDN, is people really pride it for its being comprehensive and up to date, at least in terms of the English documentation. So I've had my contractor team on board and helping me out. I was very fortunate to be able to get 3 contractors who I've worked with in the past, so they're already very familiar with how MDN works, and there was no onboarding time needed as a result. So deliberately chose them for that. And then also what happened at the same time was I don't know how much you know about the MDN Product Advisory Board, but it's so we have a it's a group, it's a board made up of interested parties from the major players in the industry. So we have folks on there from Google, Microsoft, W3C, Samsung, Boku, Igalia have just joined us. So, you know, a bunch of companies that have a very deep vested interest in the web and MDN and keeping it going. So obviously, you know, and for the last 3 years or so, those folks have provided us with a lot of really useful advice and input on various platform directions and strategy changes and things. So it's been super useful. But obviously, when the happenings of August took place, they were very worried about this. They were like, well, whoa, what the hell kind of thing. So a bunch of conversations happened, and Mozilla leadership basically said to those folks, you know, you care about MDN, how can you support us better going forward and help us to get through this? So long story short is they've put together a like a not-for-profit entity called Open Web Docs, whose aim is to provide funding for web platform documentation projects. And they've already got their first employee of this not-for-profit, who is actually one of our old writers. And so he's come back and he's now contributing full-time to MDN again, but just for a different organization. And then they're hiring more people as well. So, and then the governance is basically going to work in a similar way to kind of how it worked anyway. It's just a bit more of an official rubber stamp on it, is that you know, the actual Mozilla MDN writers and the Open Web Docs writers and anybody actually inside the different organizations that's doing work on MDN, which there are quite a few, you know, folks inside Microsoft and Google and Samsung that do quite a lot of work on MDN, and anybody else that's contributing to documentation get together on an editorial steering committee and just agree on, you know, what documentation we're writing next, what direction we're going in, you know. So in, you know, basically, so we're sort of working towards like an open governance model in terms of the content of MDN. So it's definitely getting back towards health again with all of the support we've had from the wider industry. So, you know, it's back in a good place again now, I'd say.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. And I guess it leads directly into a follow-up question that I have for you real quick. What can we expect from 2021 with MDN? Is there any high-level plans for goals that MDN wants to achieve, or things that they want to continue working on or updating moving into the new year?
So that's a really good question. I'd say that there's a couple of different streams on this. So there's one stream which is the kind of a, you know, continuing to promote the good health of MDN just in terms of what it offers right now. So, you know, the solid web platform reference documentation, the learning documentation, and we're putting together a roadmap of what to do in 2021 in terms of, you know, what documentation do we really want to achieve. And that's being put together with useful information taken from places like the Web Developer Needs Assessment Survey, for example. You know, the survey, well, I'm actually supposed to be putting out the 2020 survey results today as it happens. But, you know, the 2019 results were really helpful in terms of figuring out developers' biggest pain points, and therefore figuring out things like what documentation would be most useful to them, you know, what tools would help them the most in sorting out those pain points. So yeah, we've got a whole bunch of documentation we want to achieve, you know, stuff like we'd like to get complete documentation for all of the modern ECMAScript features, much better accessibility and security documentation. There's a lot of pretty low-hanging fruit that we could really do great things with. The other stream is related to kind of future strategy and kind of platform evolution kind of stuff. So we have a whole big strategy doc and a bunch of ideas of places we could go with MDN. And without saying too much, because this is really all up in the air at the moment, there's a few places we'd like to go in terms of making MDN into a much stronger learning platform, and actually having things like certifications and, you know, real sort of deep kind of, you know, educational tools to help people get jobs, that kind of stuff. We'd also like to look into turning it from kind of, mostly a provider of reference material to also being a provider of task and solutions based material. So, mostly it's reference material at the moment, but we'd like to change that a bit and say, okay, that's really effective if you're a professional dev and you know pretty much what you're looking for, and you go, I'd like to find the syntax of this JavaScript method. That's it. MDN's great for that, but when you're a complete beginner and you're like, I'd quite like to make a ball bounce across the screen, but I have absolutely no idea what technologies I'm even looking for to do that, it's not quite so effective for that kind of learning path. So we're looking to add all sorts of in-context help, probably a more effective forum experience, and more content, which would make that much more of a realistic possibility. So, cookbook type solutions and things that actually allow you to construct a solution to your particular problem more easily. So that's going to be a lot of our work in 2021, I think, figuring out how to make it more effective to more people.
Awesome.
That's all I got.
That's great. Thanks for the answer there.
Cool.
If anyone else has questions, please jump in.
Actually, I have the question.
Sure.
And this is more like from the community point of view, because I believe like infrastructure kind of like change like this will garner a lot of reaction from the community, and I wonder like what happens to the contribution data from Kuma in the past? Like, is it gone, or like how do you even retain that, if it's possible?
So this is a really good question, and one that's come up a few times. The data is certainly not gone. We had the entire database still sat there. It's just that there's no way to access that right now. So because we had such a small team and just no time to figure it out, the stopgap solution that we've done for the moment is just to provide a simple text file somewhere that says, this page has been contributed to by these contributors, just to make sure that you can see which pages different people have contributed to. Of course, that's not nearly enough, because, some people might have added one word to that document. Some people might have written 2/3 of it in the first place. So we're looking into what would be the most effective way to expose that data again. But yeah,
well, good to hear. But
yeah,
good to hear that at least like the contribution data is still there. Oh, cool. Tim, I know that you're. Yeah, I was gonna ask.
I have a question about the localization. You say it's frozen, and I see it's not possible to localize pages anymore, but if I go to the Dutch version of the MDN, the first call I see is translate pages. So the call is still there.
Oh, where are you seeing that? Sorry.
Yeah, and on the front page, there are a few tasks you can do, submit new articles, etc. And one of the things is translate, and it's lead to this page. I put it in the chat. And it's how about starting a new translation. And in a community point of view, that's not good to show that to people, because then we lose them as contributors if they can't.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'm really, really glad you pointed that out. So I am currently in the process of trying to update all of the contribution pages to make sure that we don't have such anomalies available, but I'm really glad you pointed that out. And you said that was linked from somewhere. Is that linked from the actual front page, did you say?
Yes.
Right. Yes, we definitely need to get that figured out then. Thank you very much for pointing that out.
On the front page, there's a section help MDN make better, or I don't know. I look into the Dutch version at this moment. And then you have get started, do other things, and then translate.
Yep, you're absolutely right, but that should not be there. And in fact, I thought that had actually been removed. So it's dismaying to see that it's still there. So, but yeah, I will definitely sort that out.
That brings up a good point here, Chris. So if any of our contributors or anybody that we know that's maybe watching this video right now or later, if they come across things on the MDN pages that they feel maybe need to get rectified, a similar situation to this, how can they reach out to you? What's the preferred contact?
Sorry, I'm muted.
Chris, you're muted.
I was muted. I'm not muted anymore. So the best way to contact us about a problem is to go to the content repository. So it's just github.com/mdn/content, and file an issue on that repo. That will be the best way to reach us. Also, they could reach us on the Mozilla's Matrix server. So we have the MDN web docs room on the Matrix server, which I monitor. So they could also reach out and talk to us there.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Cool. Anybody else have any question for Chris? Otherwise, we have a few minutes left to talk about updates. No? Cool. Then thank you so much, Chris, for coming into this call. I think it's really helpful for the contributors to know about this, because I believe they're also interested in helping MDN as well. So yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for listening and for all the great questions. I very much appreciate it.
Cool. Moving on to our next topic, which is about the SUMO tagging experiment. This is something that we've been doing from last week, which basically is a thing that we do to try to improve our tagging system in Kitsune. So as you know, we have like tag in the AAQ flow. So essentially, like each question can be tagged with like a lot of different tags. But right now, there is no kind of like, we can really get meaningful insight from the tag that we have. So we are trying to improve that, which basically this experiment is trying to, like we want to see if there's something we can improve from the tagging system point of view. So this is just an experiment, which basically part of a larger project. So we want to go, like really small with doing this experiment. But the experiment itself is, initially we planned to do it only in 1 week, but then it got pushed back and we kind of like do it until the end of this week. So it's still happening right now. And a few people are helping us with this project, which I already mentioned in the beginning of this meeting, who are like Danny, Matthew, Noah, and Ms. Gobalas. And so like for any other people, if you're willing to help with this, ping me, because like we still have like a week to work on this experiment. So yeah, that is from the tagging experiment. Next one is product updates, which I will over to JR.
Sure. Yeah. So for product updates, I think the biggest thing to mention here is that the Mac OS and Linux launch for the VPN products has been delayed until January. So that's something that there was a lot of hype about and we were really excited for, but there was a couple things that didn't get finalized that needed to get finalized before that launch that we're still following up on. So keep an eye out for those two platforms to launch for the VPN product early next year. Firefox 84 for desktop and for mobile went out earlier this week. And those two are doing good right now. They were kind of feature light in most respects compared to other releases, just because it's the end of the year and we didn't want to pack a whole bunch of features in that could potentially cause any issues that, engineers may be on vacation during the time that, this release is. So we definitely want to avoid things like that. But there are a couple things to mention coming from the Firefox 84 update, and one of them is Apple Silicon. So Apple Silicon has been causing some issues in the recent updates, and this particular one is affecting some major sites. So this is sites like Hulu, Amazon Prime, Netflix. There's a couple sites where if you have a Mac system and you're on Apple Silicon, that you need Rosetta installed again in order for the sites to function fully. So we have a KB article that went out with the forum updates or the release notes that will explain how users can get around this issue. And then the other part of that is that the engineering team is hoping to get that updated in probably a dot release before the next major release. So before the January release of Firefox 85, we'll hopefully have a resolution in there for that. But it is something to call out just to make sure that if you guys are on the forums and you start seeing questions on the forums or on social about people on Mac having issues with some of the major streaming sites and things like that coming up properly, then it's most likely associated with this issue, and you'll want to refer to the knowledge base article so that they can get it resolved. Another thing to call out here is something that just came up recently after the Google outage. I don't know how many of you started mildly panicking when Google went down, Gmail went down, YouTube went down. I know that I was panicking just a little bit because a lot of things happen through those specific services. So it was kind of scary. But something that's come out of that's an issue is with Firefox accounts. So it seems there's some people that are having a lockout issue with Gmail due to the outage on Google has adversely affected the two-step authentication for Firefox accounts. So we're still investigating that. We want to follow up with the Firefox team. And if we do have any kind of updates or notes on workarounds for this and how to fix it or a resolution, then keep an eye on any updates to the blog posts we have out to the community and any kind of communications from Kiki letting everyone know that, hey, here's a workaround for a specific issue if users are seeing it. And that's about it from me. Does anybody have any questions?
I actually have one more additional update related to the changes. There's one more change from the add-on team, which essentially they're trying to kind of like send or like create a new prompt in the desktop browser to kind of notify people who probably have installed an extension in the past that changed their default search engine. So if you have installed that kind of like extension in the past, you might gonna come across a like a prompt in your browser to confirm if you really want to change your default default search engine. So I think that's coming along with the Firefox 84, which is this week. And I actually have prepared the canned response for that, which I will add to this to the wiki page after this meeting. Cool. Sorry, I think I cut you, Justin.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that Firefox accounts issue. So right now, like, what is the status for folks who have been locked out? Are they still locked out until we have a solution, or do we have a workaround that we can offer them? I'm curious, like, what is the current situation?
Kiki, I don't know. You might know more about it than I do right now, since I just heard about it this and I'm still collecting information on it. But yeah, if you have any details on it, feel free to share them.
Yeah, from my understanding, I think the only solution for people who are locked out is to file a bug in Bugzilla. There's a link on our KB article where people can file a bug if they're locked out of, like of their Firefox account because of verification process. But if it's because of 2FA failure, then I don't think that they can regain access to their account back. So yeah, I think there's a difference because I think the outage is kind of like affect this locked out issue. So I think we should be able to remedy this situation at least. But that is also the things that we need to discuss with the Firefox account team. Cool. Yeah, anybody else have any question? We're actually running out of time already. So thank you so much for attending our last community meeting. I know that like 2020 is kind of like a pretty interesting year. I'm quite happy that it's, like it's over soon, but I'm not expecting a lot from 2021 as well. But I hope you have a, like you got to enjoy the rest of this year with the holiday, although we might probably won't be able to go anywhere as well. But yeah, hope you enjoy your holiday, folks.
Thanks
Thank you. Happy holidays.
All right. Cheers, folks.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks. See you next year.
The recording has stopped.